I read that and I'm like, I hope somebody else chimes in because I know this, but I'm being forced to believe that I don't know this. And so I literally read your message, Greta, like 20 times. And I like splashed some water in my face. I'm like, am I tired? Am I not reading this right? Like, I know this, right? Okay, so let's review. We were talking about loan to value. LTV is loan to value, okay? Let's use a quick scenario on appraisals, okay? Contract sales price between buyer and seller is $400,000. Sellers agreed to sell for 400, buyers agreed to buy for 400, okay? The closing cost contribution is not important in this discussion, okay? It's got nothing to do with the appraisal, okay? Let's say that the appraisal comes in at, the requirement of the appraisal is that it comes in at 400 or higher, okay? Now, the buyer is going to receive the appraisal, okay? So let's say the appraisal comes in at 405. Then the buyer's agent will call the lender, or will call the listing agent and say, hey, we're good on the appraisal, okay? They're under no obligation to share it, and they're under no obligation to share the actual document, and they're under no obligation to tell them what the number was, okay? If I call a seller who just agreed to sell me a $400,000 house or a $405,000 house for 400, they're just gonna get pissed off. That there's no good that's gonna come from that, okay? So the buyer's agent should simply say, hey, we're good on the appraisal, moving right along. Make sense? Now, if the appraisal comes in low, if the appraisal comes in below 400, then here's what happens. The first thing that has to happen is the buyer / buyer's agent will send a copy of that low appraisal to the listing agent, okay, accompanied by a document called the amendment to reduce the sales price, okay? And you will ask them to reduce the sales price to the appraisal value, okay? Let's just say, for example, in this scenario, it comes in at 380, okay? So the buyer will submit the low appraisal and say, Mr. Seller, I'd like for you to lower the price to 380. If they agree to lower the price to 380, the buyer is obligated to move forward, okay? If they say no, and by the way, no is anything shy of agreeing to 380. If they were to say, yeah, I'll lower it to 390, that's essentially saying no. Follow that? If they say no, then as long as this all happens between or within the appraisal contingency, then the buyer can leave the deal without penalty. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, everything is a function of the loan to value. So when the lender is going to, in a normal situation, right? Let's say it's 20% down. The loan will be 320,000, and the buyer's down payment will be 80,000. Okay, if the home comes in at or above list price, or I'm sorry, the appraisal comes in at or above contract price, you got no problem. The buyer brings their 80, the lender brings their 320, and all's good. Okay, when the bank does the appraisal, it's not even for the benefit of the buyer. It's for the benefit of the lender. Okay, the lender is trying to determine if through their analysis, they believe the home is worth 400. Okay, and let's just assume for a second they do that analysis and they say, we think it's 380. Now, regardless of whether it's that they used good comps or any of that kind of thing, you can appeal it if you'd like, although it's generally not all that successful. Let's say that it's 380. The seller gets a request from the buyer that says lower the price. Seller says no. Buyer says, I really love this house, I want to buy it anyway. Okay, so what the bank will do is they will loan 80% of the LTV, the loan to value, on the lower of the two, which is the appraisal value or the contract sales price. In this situation, the lower would be the appraisal. So they will loan on 80% of the 380. The buyer will then essentially have to come up with the difference. But I think about it this way, which is the bank will do 80% of the appraisal value, which is 380. In that situation, it's $304,000. The buyer will bring 20% of the the appraised value, which in this scenario would be $76,000. Yet because the buyer and seller have agreed to exchange it for 400, the buyer is responsible for bringing the rest. Okay. They're under no obligation to do that, but they could. Okay. So Greta made a comment yesterday on the chat that was, you know, the cash is the cash. What difference does it make? That's true. However, it's a function of the loan to value. So if you put down 20%, then the lender says, hey, this is somebody who's probably not going to walk away from this deal, so we feel even more comfortable loaning it. If ultimately that $80,000 represents less than 20% of the value, then it's more risky for the bank, and so they're going to charge PMI. Okay. So I also gave another scenario yesterday where they could go back to the bank and say, hey, I was planning on putting down 20%. The seller won't lower the price. I still want to buy the home. Let's do 10% down. Okay. And you can change the way the loan is organized. There's a couple of challenges with that. Number one is you most likely put 20% down on your financing contingency. So you are free to change it, but you're going to lose the protections of the financing contingency if you get a denial. Okay. By that time, you probably don't worry so much about that because the appraisal deadline and the financing deadline are usually pretty close to one another. So that's probably not going to be a huge issue, but it is something to be aware of. The other thing is if now you got to borrow more money, you of course got to qualify to borrow more money. And if you are going to put down less than 20%, you also now have to pay PMI, so you have to qualify for that too. Okay. So the takeaway here is work with a lender who you're able to communicate with whenever you want to communicate with them. Okay. Who can walk you through these challenges. Let me give you a hint. If your lender's contact information includes a 7-digit extension number, it's probably not a good lender. Okay. If they're in Seattle, they're probably not the lender you want to work with. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you send them a message and it takes 3 days to get to them, they should be fired.
Yes, sir.
All right, beautiful. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay.
That was great. Thank you for taking us through that.
No problem.
Bill, that happened to me when I sold my house in New York to come down here, and it wasn't explained to me nearly as well as you just did. It was only a few $1,000s and wasn't a huge deal in the long run, but you explained it far, far better.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, one last.
Hey, I have a question about that.
Go ahead.
So sometimes I'll fill out the contract, and if I only have the pre-approval letter, and I'm unsure what the LTV is, and it's maybe like the weekend or so, what's like a rule of thumb to put for the loan amount on? You know, if it's a conventional, should you like automatically put 95, 90? Is that a like make or break it type of thing where you have to go back and redo that portion of the contract for the?
So great question. I'm going to give you an answer you're probably not expecting, which is okay. First of all, you can't go back and quote redo anything. Everything would have to be agreed upon. Yeah. Okay. So if you go from 20% to 10%. And you still want to be protected with the financing contingency, that has to be agreed upon by the seller. You can't just like change your mind. Okay. The answer that I'm going to give you is I would never put myself in that situation. Honestly, my buyer is going to go through and have a very serious conversation with the lender prior to finding a home. And they're going to have looked at the loan worksheet. They're going to have calculated this stuff. I'm going to chat with them too, if necessary. And they're going to determine what kind of loan they want to buy this home with. When they go and present an offer to a seller, when most likely there's going to be additional offers, it's time to get serious. Let's do our research and let's put the right number on there. Okay?
Right, but it's not on the pre-approval letter. I guess is what I'm getting. Like if they don't know and possibly somebody just gave it to you on a Friday and you haven't necessarily talked to that lender, then you wouldn't know by looking at the pre-approval letter. I guess is what I'm.
I suppose you're right, but my hope is that there's been more conversations with the lender and the buyer where they would say, hey, do you plan to put 5% down, 15% down, 10%, 20%, 80%? I need to know because I'm filling this out to protect you. If you can't give me clear understanding of how you want to be protected, you're not going to be protected. Are you clear?
Hey, Bill, I got a comment on that as well.
Okay.
Is it possible for a situation like what Markia is saying, for you to basically, when you call that agent, because you know how aggressive it is right now, it's over the weekend, you don't know for sure. So she wants to get her buyer to be able to get the house. Can she call the agent? And is it an option to leave that particular section of it blank in the meantime? Or would she still have to put something in there? She still would have to put something in there regardless.
I mean,
And
only
if
if
she
she
didn't,
wants to have a contingency.
yeah, but I'm saying like, and then call that agent and say, hey, definitely they're qualified. I'm going to verify for sure on Monday and add that to it, but we want to make sure we got our offer in. I think that's kind of like what she was saying with the
Yeah, I
weekend.
hear you. I hear you. If I was a seller,
I've run into that
that offer-
situation like 3 times. That's what I was asking.
if I was a seller and I got that call and I had one possible offer, I would be flexible. The second I have another offer, I'm not paying attention to you unless you get your financing straight. Okay. So understand that the more that somebody drags their feet or the last minute they decide they want to buy something and they don't have their ducks in a row, it's not in their best interest. Right.
So,
By that time, you've already had hopefully a buyer consultation with them where you've expressed how important some of these concepts are. Okay.
and I also would have talked to their lender to find out that information.
Right. Like she's suggesting, like,
Right, but sometimes
wait
people
on a
get
Friday or
pre-approved at
something.
the last minute just because they find a home that they want. And like, hey, I just got my pre-approval letter, and then give it to you, and then you go the weekend to go show a home, and you're like, well, like, what's the LTV here? And they're like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, trying to get in contact with the lender, but a pre-approval at the last minute type of situation.
Yeah, I assume you're asking that question because you've had that scenario. I would say that's fairly rare. But it all comes.
I had a new construction before, and they fill out the documentation, and the other agent just put a number there, and it was like 20%, like it was like a 90%, and my client was like, "That's not, I can't put 20% down." And I talked to the other agent, and she's like, she went through the lender from the new construction, and she was like, "Yeah, we can always just change it." And my client was like, "No, like I'd rather it be, what it's supposed, what I can afford versus what you just putting down."
First of all, you can't always change it. And if I heard even half of the words that you just told me from another agent, we wouldn't be talking anymore. Okay.
It was a lender from the new construction, so I was just like, okay, so it wasn't somebody that she was working with. They made her go through.
That's a little bit different, right? You're not generally going to have multiple offers on a new home construction neighborhood. And
Right.
if you're working with the in-house person, they're patting each other's pockets anyway. So it's a little bit different for new construction. But by the time I put a buyer in the car or I follow a buyer to a house, because I'm like literally I've probably helped, I don't know, 400 or 500 buyers, and I can only think of one client I ever put in my car. I don't really want to make small.
No, that's right.
Okay. How can someone get a pre-approval after you start looking? Because some agents are so desperate to go show homes that they don't actually follow the procedures, right? Remember, we're business owners. Don't take somebody to a home that they can't afford. It's not going to help you. Okay. If I show a $400,000 home to you, Travis, and you can only afford a $350,000 home, you're going to like it. Okay. You will definitely like it. It will be better than everything you've ever seen. But the problem is you can't afford it. So how is that helpful? Okay. Then I start showing you the 350 homes and you're like, I don't think this is the right time to buy. That's because you're pissed. And now I'm pissed. You see what I'm saying?
Hey, Bill, I have a question.
Okay. Yes.
I have a quick question about the what is that? The appraisal contingency.
Yeah.
While I was doing some of my contracts where I was losing all the time, one of the realtors that I spoke to said, "Hey, I have a couple of offers with the where they waive the appraisal contingency," and I was like, "I ain't never doing that." but now that you're mentioning it, would you? I mean, I guess it depends on the situation. Would you do something like that?
Appraisal contingency in some respects, in my opinion, borders on Well, let me rephrase that. There are certain situations where I would waive the appraisal contingency if my buyer was capable of making up a significant difference if possible, right? However, if you're like, oh, well, if it appraises really low and my buyer can't come up with the difference, we'll just back out. That's borderline on an ethical issue, right? Actually, I think that's probably a bit beyond violating an ethical issue. The point of the matter is if your client can't come up to the table with the difference, then you should be waiving the appraisal contingency. I'll give you another idea. Like when I bought my townhome, what was that, 5 or 6 years ago? I waived. It was off market, and there was already multiple offers, and I got a hint that it was going to become available, and I submitted an offer, and I waived my financing contingency. The reason why I waived my financing contingency is because all my financials are already done. It's my tax returns, right? I don't have a salary, right? What they're going to use to assess me has already happened, and I already have proof that it happened. Do you see what I'm saying? So and I already knew that I was well qualified to buy, right? So I wasn't worried that I was going to, quote, lose my job or something, right? Or not be able to afford it. I was well within my budget. You see what I'm saying? So if I had 50 grand, in the bank, and I was willing to throw it at the home if the appraisal came in low, then yeah, you can waive your appraisal contingency. But if you're trying to do that kind of stuff to win, and then you're going to screw over the seller later, I don't like that at all. Okay. All right, guys. I'm assuming that we have a great turnout here because you want to hear Chartmasters, not me, right?
Yes.
Has this been helpful though?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is, but I think I'm struggling because I think part of what I'm having a problem with is I come from the mindset of everyone's well qualified. And I guess I've got to get it in my mind that there are people out there buying homes that aren't well qualified.
All right, I'm going to stop share so I can look you dead in the face, Greta.
I know.
The vast majority of people are broke.
Okay.
Okay. They just did a survey that said something like 40% of Americans, this is like within the last week, 40% of Americans cannot handle a $1,000 emergency.
Okay.
They are literally on the brink all the time. Okay. The vast majority of people have very low net worths. They have very low liquid assets, and they apparently don't seem to give a damn about credit. Okay. So you got to ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
And just by the way, just because somebody makes a lot of money, like let's say an independent contractor or a business owner or something like that, a lot of them write it all off anyway. So yeah, you might have a lot of money in the bank, but the tax guy and the lender think you don't make anything, right? So don't just say, oh yeah, I should be good on the loan. Okay, if you're so confident, let's have a conversation and let's figure out what we're looking at. Okay, so I'm not suggesting that everyone's got credit challenges, but I'm suggesting that there's not that many people with 800 credit scores and 20% down.
Okay.
Is that?
I think I need a class
Anybody?
on what that looks like, because it's not the world that I live in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that type of picture, and maybe I don't know how to recognize it, and I don't know how to deal with it.
So it's not like something you see in their face. It's
right.
The answer they give you when you ask the right question.
Right, but I guess I don't. It's a separate conversation between you and me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you could run a business and have an incredibly successful business and never interact with a single person that I just described.
Yeah.
But you just need to know that they're out there. Okay. And the truth of the matter is they also want to build wealth. They also need a place to live. They also are good people, right? And they're looking for a talented, hardworking, ethical agent like the 25 of you to walk them through this process. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't understand the angle that I need to be looking at it, is my point.
So the angle is simple. It's, tell me a little bit, will you be buying this home with cash or will you be obtaining a mortgage? Okay. If they will say cash, then you're going to say, hey, when we get to the point, we're going to, when we submit an offer, we're going to need a proof, what's called proof of funds, meaning show me that you've got X number of dollars in the bank or some, you know, asset of some sort, stock or something.
Right.
Okay. If they say no, thanks for asking, but I'm going to be, you know, getting a mortgage, right? That is a question that is complementary to people that are getting mortgages, right? And the lion's share of people are getting mortgages anyway. Even if you had the money to buy a home with cash right now, I think that would be a bad idea, right? Money is way too cheap to borrow. I'd rather borrow it, okay? And use the cash for something different. So the vast majority of people are probably going to be obtaining mortgages right now. So once they go and sit down with a mortgage person that you trust, that's going to educate your consumer and show them all the options, then you will get the news that this person is good or needs some help. Okay. And whatever the answer is, if you're willing to work with them, which you should be, in my opinion, then you just got to ask, you know, hey, is this a 2-week problem, a 2-year problem? Is this a 6-month problem? Right? Walk me through what we're working with here, and I'll hold your hand the whole way. And then we're going to get you what you need. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's not like you don't like look at them and be like, you look like a 600 credit score. You look like a 400 credit score. It's not that at all. It's just simply asking the question, you know, tell me a little bit about how you plan to finance this particular purchase, right? Oh, I have no idea. Great. Here's an introduction to a lender or several lenders. Okay. Hey, Greta, guess what? They said I can, you know, qualify for a conventional loan, and it's going to be 320, and I'm going to put down 10%. Beautiful. Show me the loan worksheet, because we're about to go look at homes. And the second we find something, I need to know exactly how to protect you in the financing contingency. Well, I don't know how to do that. Give me the name of your lender right now. Because if they don't know how to do that, or they're not willing to do it, they're fired. Does that make sense? Okay, let me get back to sharing the screen. Okay, here's, I sent so in the, what do you call it? The intranet, there's about an 83 or 84 page Chartmasters presentation. I, this morning, narrowed it down to about 40 pages, 41 or 42 pages that I thought would be the most important ones to talk about. Okay, and I posted that on the announcements chat this morning. By the way, before I forget, we probably are going to run a couple minutes late today. And I also want to remind everyone that at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, my coach, Deb Jolly, will be in this room coaching and teaching and helping you guys. My advice is, how do I want to say this? Let's keep the questioning and the content to like 5,000 foot and above, not like the how do you deal with an appraisal contingency type of questions. Okay, I can help you with that. Okay, so let's look a little bit larger picture when she's with us, and let's learn more about, you know, things like big thinking, opportunity, business structure, mindset, goals, some of the bigger topics. And the hope is that she can inspire you or say something that you take away and say, oh my gosh, I am so thrilled and I'm ready to go clobber this business, right? Her job today is not to teach us how to like do comps or something. Make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me, okay, so again, what I'm showing you here, I have sent you in Chartmasters, or I've sent you in the announcements page, okay? Chartmasters is a company. It's a guy, an old retired IBM executive whose wife is an agent with KW in Sandy Springs. His name is Chuck Carr. And for the last 10 or 12 years, he's been building out this kind of information packet, and he sells it to Keller Williams offices, but he only sells it to Keller Williams offices. So if you're elsewhere, you do not have data like this, okay? Now, right here, we're gonna be a little quick today, okay? What you see here, these are the 41 Metro Atlanta FMLS areas. So you can see what counties they are, right? Paulding, Gwinnett, Fulton, inside and outside the perimeter, Douglas, DeKalb, West Cobb, East Cobb, Cherokee. Okay, so all the stats that we say today are within these counties, or I'm sorry, these counties, but also these FMLS areas. Okay. By the way, when you're searching for property online or doing comps or something, you know, for example, if you're in, let's say, area 51, that is basically the area bound by 85 on the south and east, you know, going northeast, 285, and then Georgia 400. So that area includes primarily Brookhaven, Chamblee, and parts of Doraville. Okay. So you can go into a lot of detail with FMLS areas, and I won't show you today, but there's a lot of areas where you can customize some of these slides to get even more specific data. Okay. Number one, Keller Williams is the number one company for market share by closed transactions by a large margin. So that would be 9, 13, 17. You could take the next 5 brokers after KW and add them all up, and we still beat them. Okay, Keller Williams is by far the market leader in Metro Atlanta for market share. Okay, this is a little of a heavy slide. I want to just point out 1 or 2 quick things. Okay, the number of do we see this line right here? This green line. That's what's considered a balanced market. Okay, this line, this black line. See this? That is the months of supply. So what I want you to see is that basically from middle of 2012 to like the beginning or almost middle of this year, it's been a buyer's market, or I'm sorry, it's been a seller's market, which is a long time. It's way more than average. Okay. And then basically middle of the year, it plummeted. So we have, you know, we'll see later, barely 1 month of supply. Okay. And we'll see later what that does to impact how quick homes sell, the percentage of list price they sell at, and the median price. Okay. What I also want to show you is, you see this little red line right here? This is how many active properties there are. And down here you can see the year, right? The different months during the year. So this slide started at the beginning of 2009 when we had 33,000 homes on the market. Today we have less than 4,000 on the market. Okay. And you can see that the general kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Seasonality of real estate, right? Where it's a little lower at the beginning and end of the year, and active listings are a little higher in the middle of the year. That totally looks different. And that's because of COVID. Okay. Okay. This is kind of like party chatter, what Andy and Leslie call party chatter. Okay. Year-to-date sales are up 3.2% versus last year. It's not particularly significant, and it's not, I don't think this slide is very telling. Okay. Median sales price is up 16.7% from last year this time. That does not mean that every single homes will sell for 16.7%. Median, remember, is if you lined up all the sales and you took the one in the middle, that's median. That is different than adding all the sales up and dividing it by the number of sales. Okay. Now,
9 o'clock.
Okay.
Sorry.
Median list price to sales price ratio is 99%. That's up 2.5% from last year. And median days on the market, you know, when we're doing the MREA2 docs for each of you individually, and we're trying to determine how many active listings we need to carry at all times. The very first time I did that with you guys, we were at 39 days, average days on the market. We went from 39 to 35 to 29 to 25 to 22, and now we're at 17. Okay, these homes are selling faster, which means they're selling for more. Okay. Okay, we're going to look at these slides a little bit more in detail in a second, but these are some great slides to have in your pocket for when somebody says, oh, well, let's try this price, and then eventually, you know, in 2 weeks, if I'm wrong, then we'll lower the price. Yeah, that strategy doesn't work, especially in the times of like buyer instant notification systems, and you know, these buyers are, you know, on Redfin and Zillow and your app and all these places, and if they see the same stale home for 2 weeks, they quit looking at it, and they're not all that focused on what the price is. So you can see here that the number of properties that sell significantly higher in the first couple of weeks that it's on the market and significantly declines as the time on the market is being reduced. Okay. Similarly, the original list price or the percentage of the list price that the sellers are receiving declines with time. Okay. And the longer time on the market increases with price reductions. Okay. Okay, here's a nice summary. Okay, this is comparing the peak of the buyer's market, which would in their analysis was January of 2009 to this past month. In January of 2009, we had over 31,000 listings, active listings. We're at 4,800 right now. Okay, fewer choices. Supply, right now we're at 1 month. If you were selling homes back in January of 2009, 16.1. Okay. You guys don't know how lucky you have it right now. Okay. That's why we talk about getting listings. Because buyers, you're going to be chasing them all over town trying to fight off 50 other buyers. Listings, you put it on the market, things gone in 10 seconds. If it's priced right. Okay. Percentage of distressed sales. Okay. 40.8% of the market was distressed sales back then. We're not even 0.5% right now. Fewer bargains. I talked to somebody yesterday about a buyer client that they're working with, and they said, I'm looking for foreclosures. Honestly, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but if you get a buyer that says I'm looking for foreclosures, you want to make sure they're not like in some type of time capsule and thinking it's 2010 or something. Okay. Nearly everybody has equity, which means nearly nobody is going to give away their house to the bank. Does that make sense? If you're in a financial stress situation, you just sell the home for what it's worth and you pocket the equity. It makes no sense to let the bank take it in the form of a foreclosure. Does that make sense? Okay. Median days on the market went from 145, now it's 18. Quicker sales. Median list price to sales price ratio, 80.3%. We would go into listing appointments and say, hey, if we're average, if we're pretty much median, we'll probably be getting about 80% of the sticker price that we list this home for. How do you feel about that? And they're like, Bill, you need to get the hell out of my house right now. Right? It's like, look, dude, I'm just sharing the data with you. I didn't create it. How can I help you? I mean, do you know how many conversations like that we used to have? Right now, 99.3%. Okay. 75% of homes used to have price reductions. Now it's 29.2. Okay. Failed listings, nearly 75% of listings that were selling at the height of the buyer market, or that were listed at the height of the buyer market, were failing. They weren't selling. Now it's only 18%. So do you guys see how important it is to be the economist of choice and to be able to pull this information out if necessary to help convince a buyer and a seller how to be successful? Okay. So I'm going to scan through these pretty quickly. So this is first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. The dark gray is 2018, the lighter gray is 2019, and the red is 2020. Okay. So price reductions. This is across all price ranges. We are now down to 29.7%. It was almost double that, meaning there was almost twice as many price reductions in in the fourth quarter of 2019 than now. Okay. Let me get to the questions here in just a second. Let me do that. All right, incidence of price reductions by price range, right? You can see that what's causing the 29.7 is like in that 750 and up price range. It's a lot higher. But if you're going and you're talking to a $200,000 to $299,000 client, okay, they're not going to have to reduce the price that often. But last year it was 42% of the time. Now it's almost 22% of the time. Okay. The biggest takeaway from today is you should focus on seller listings. Is there anyone that needs me to repeat that?
No.
Okay. Is that abundantly clear to everybody?
Yes.
Abundantly.
Okay. You guys, if I were to calculate the average amount of time that a buyer will, or a buyer's agent will spend with a buyer, it is probably in the neighborhood of around 50 hours. Okay. This is what Aubrey shared yesterday with Sarah. If you calculate the amount of time that you'll spend with a seller, it's probably more like 8 or 10 hours. So for the same amount of money and a whole lot less headache, not to mention the time saving, what would you prefer to do? Does Gary Keller write a book about leads buyers leverage, or is it leads listings leverage?
Leads listing.
Okay, good. All right. Price reduction effect on list price to sales price ratio. If this is by price range, so let's use 300 to 499 as an example. Okay, if the home is listed and requires a price reduction in order to go under contract, it will on average, or this is technically median, sell for 94.5% of its original asking price. If instead they price it correctly on day one, the median list price to sales price ratio is 100%. Can't get better than that. Okay. So on a, let's say $400,000 home, that's 5.5% difference. That's over $20,000 that is at stake, whether you price that home correctly or not day one. Does that make sense?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so this, let's take this slide, for example, this little price bracket right here. So 300 to 500. So let's just say it's a $400,000 house. If I price it correctly on day one, the median list price to sales price ratio is 100%. If I do not price it correctly on day one, meaning it will require a price reduction in order to get a contract, then it will ultimately sell for 94%, 94.5% of its original asking price. That is 5.5% difference, right? 94.5 against 100. And for a $400,000 house, that's what, $22,000.
Okay.
Okay, that's what's at stake by pricing a home correctly or not correctly. Meaning, guys, don't be afraid to go in your will be soon to be seller's competition, right? If there's 5 or 6 homes that seller will ultimately be competing against, once you list it, you owe it to the seller. Man, you're going to be walking away from that table with over $10,000 competition. Take this thing seriously. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Days on the market. When the home is, let's look at that same price range, 300 to 499. If the home is correctly priced, it will sell in a median number of days of 8. If it is not correctly priced, 73. I would print this out in color, laminate it, and bring it with me every time I left the house. Okay. And when a seller says, let's try my price, say, I got a quick question for you, sir.
Mm.
Would you prefer to make your bed and clean your kitchen and wipe off the counter 73 times? Or would you prefer to do it 8 times? And you hand them this slide and you ask them to sign the paperwork for your price. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Failed listings. Y'all see this? 2018, 2019 looks pretty similar, right? The number, as you would expect, the number of failed listings in the middle part of the year is a little bit lower, right? Because there's more buyers typically out. And you can see that how the data looks in 2020, which is totally incongruent to anything we've ever seen because of COVID, right? So what we're seeing here is only 18% of listings are failing. Okay, so, and we'll see in a second on what I call the game board, or I didn't come up with that, Chuck Carr did. You'll see some more detail about that, okay? Resale failed listing percentages by price range. You can look at by price range, right? So it's half of homes, $1.5 million or more are failing, but it's only 11% between 2 and 300. So make sure that if you're on the luxury side, or if you're on the, let's say first time home buyer side, that you're aware of the differences, okay? You don't want to give the overall market data if the specific price range data would be more significant when you're speaking to that type of person, okay? This is probably my favorite slide in all of Chartmasters, okay? This is the slide I always run to when the data comes out, okay? So let's take 100 listings, finalized listings, okay? Let's go to the left first. 18 of those 100, so of course that's 18%, fail, meaning they will not sell, okay? More often than not, it is an overpricing issue, okay? I would venture to say it is probably 99.5% overpricing and 0.5% the agent had no idea what the hell they're doing, okay? But even a bad agent can sell a well-priced home quickly. It's all about price, okay? Now, if 18 failed to sell, 82 did sell. Follow me? So now we're right here. Now, of those 82 that sold, 24 of them required a price reduction. And when they got a price reduction and ultimately sold, it took them 77 days on the market and they got 93.5%. This is across all price ranges again, okay? The other 58 properties that did not require a price reduction, they sold for 100% of list price in 8 days. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would you prefer to get 100% of list price or 93.5% of list price? Would you prefer to have your home on the market for 8 days or 77 days? And assuming they're gonna say this, then they need to be correctly priced on day one, okay? So if you take the 18% that never sell and the 24% or 24 that needed to have a price reduction to sell, okay, 42% of every 100 listings, even now, are overpriced. Some of them will never sell, and some of them need a price reduction to sell. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep. Hey, Bill, I got a question.
Okay.
That 93%, that's of the original list price?
Yes.
Or of the new price?
That's a good question. So this slide is the original list price, and I've got a slide here in a second that I'll show you the other way. Okay.
I got a question.
All right.
That 70%, 58 have no price reduction. 70%, I'm confused on that.
So that is, you see how it says?
Oh, 70% of the 82 sold.
Yeah, exactly.
I got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Next slide. All right, guys. By price range, the number of percentage of sales that are selling at or above list price, right? So if your home is $100,000 or less, 30.6% of those sales are happening at list price or above list price. By the way, the little red thing is the percentage of distressed properties within that bar, okay? So you can see here, like 300 to 500, distressed properties make up 0.1% of the market. 500 to 750, 0.1% of the market. 750 to 100 or to a million, there's no distressed sales, right? So if you have a buyer that's like, well, I'm an investor and I want some foreclosures and I don't care if they're in Dahlonega or Hampton or Snellville or Paulding County, go find a different client. That dude is going to run you ragged and you're going to end up hating real estate. And it's not supposed to be that way. I hope I didn't offend anyone.
No, you didn't.
Okay. Days on the market for homes that are at or above list price. Okay, let's go back to our price range here, 300 to 499. Again, all sales are 18 days. Okay, but if you're going to get above listing price, it's going to happen in the first week. Okay. Here's a summary. I won't read the whole thing, but here's a summary. Guys, we are supposed to be the economist of choice. Okay, we need to have, I know some of us don't want to learn the financial world and some of us don't want to learn the math and the economics and all that. I'll just say that the more time you invest in this material, the more likely you will be to share it. And the more likely you share it, the more opportunities you will get because people will be impressed with you. If you can't have a financial discussion with somebody or an investment related discussion with somebody, they're not going to trust you with a $500,000 investment. Okay. Here's comparing fourth quarter 2019 to fourth quarter 2020. Median days on the market, down. Overall list price reductions, down. Original list price to sales price ratio, up. Failed listing percentage, down. Months of supply, cut in half, more than half. Number of active listings, more than half down. Number of pending listings, up. Number of sales, up. Number of distressed property, half of what it was last year, and it ain't that much anyway. right? Number of percentage of change of homes sold, okay? So there's more sales than there have been in the past, right? Year over year, there's barely any movement in 2018. 2019, it was also pretty small. 2020, you got pretty massive jumps. And this, of course, was when most of the shutdowns were happening, okay? Distressed properties, guys, there's hardly any distressed properties. Don't build a business plan on REOs, okay? It's not the time, okay? This is distressed property by price range, right? There is not a single foreclosure between 750 and 1.5 or short sale. They all got equity, okay? I always love this slide. This is really interesting. So it goes back to 2003. I know it's hard to read, but it just shows you what the median sales price was. When I remember going into like a listing appointment in 2000, let's say 11 or 2012, and we'd know, hey, this person bought their home in the height of the market, and let's say like January of 2007 or something. And we'd say, so you see where you bought the home and you see where we are now? Yeah. Would you like to rent this instead of selling it? Because you're going to get your ass handed to you if you sell it. You see what I'm saying? Percentage of original list price received by seller. This is year over year. We looked at this slide by not year over year before, but here's a year over year. This is, Charleston, what you were talking about. Or I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry. Resale, new versus resale. I don't really even like this slide so much. New properties over list price is really deceiving. Let's not even go there. Days on the market, you can see how it's adjusting by year and by quarter. And here you can see it by price range. So you can see there's a reduction in days on the market year over year, 2019 to 2020, in every single price range except for 1.5 million and higher. See that?
Wow.
Price reduction effect. Okay, this is another look at the some of the same data by price range, whether the home got a price reduction or did not need one. Okay, this is the slide you were talking about, Charleston. So even if the home does not need a price reduction, in these quarters it got 100%. If you did need a price reduction, this is a little complex here, but you're not getting 100% of the new price. You're actually getting about 98.5% of the new price. So it's not like you're reducing the price and getting 100% of the new price. You're actually not even getting 100% of the new price either, because it has a bit of a stigma. Does that make sense? Okay, this is a slide that I think that you guys should have also. So even though we got a really, really strong seller's market, the fact is that still 71% of the time, sellers are being asked to pay closing costs. Okay, let me rephrase that. Sellers are paying closing costs. They're probably asked to pay even more. Okay, but they're contractually agreeing to pay closing costs 71% of the time. Okay, and you can see that, interestingly enough, that's actually increasing year over year. Okay.
Why is that? Is it because of the higher prices people are paying?
That's probably a little bit of a factor. I'm trying to think if I can connect it a different way. I would say, let me think about that for a second. I mean, I don't know if I would be interested to see the correlation with this, and I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff, but because the interest rates are so low, people are saying to themselves, gosh, I don't even want to bring the closing cost. I'd rather do something different with the cash. So I'll ask for, let's say, $5,000 in closing cost, and then I'll raise the price $5,000. So the seller ends up with the same amount of money, and I won't have to come out of pocket for the closing cost, right? So that's a good point. Option as well, or another reason as well. Okay, here's it broken down by price range. So you might show this to a seller and say, hey, I'm not telling you have to agree to do this, but I'm just telling you that about 3/4 of the time in this price range, sellers are agreeing to pay closing costs. So again, I'm not telling you have to agree, but don't be shocked when it happens. My job is to help you understand if it's reasonable, right? So if the top number is big enough, yeah, I'll pay some closing costs. But if the top number is not big enough, you pay them yourself. Okay. And here's the amount of money that they pay. Remember, this is a look at by price range. This yellow right here, that's a balanced market, 6 to 7 months of supply. All this green right here is a seller's market, which is 0 to 6 months of supply. If we were having this conversation about a year ago, starting at around $500,000 is when it started to become a seller's market. Now you got to be up near 1.5 million for it to be a, I'm sorry, it would have turned into a buyer's market. Now you got to be up to about 1.5 months of supply to be a buyer's market. Let me say that again. You have to be around $1.5 million to be a buyer's market. Okay. And that's year over year by price range. And this is a different way to look at that game board that I showed you, which is houses that sell with a median number of days of 8. Those properties are, quote, in the market. They're priced right, the market's going to react, and they don't have to reduce the price. 24% are people that, quote, chased the market. These are people that had to reduce the price in order to sell. And the 18%, it's not really drawn to scale here, but the 18% are out of the market. Those are the listings that are going to expire. Okay, so I think that's a good slide to use and to have. Okay, here's a little bit more detail about the interest as the number of weeks and days go by, right? The interest at the very beginning of the listing period is super high. Number of homes sold is very high. And then as you would expect, the longer the home's on the market, the fewer properties are selling. Okay, we kind of went through a little bit of those already. This just shows you, of course, that as the supply of months of supply of the market continues to decline and continues to get even more out of whack to a balanced market. And of course, as you would expect, as the supply decreases, the median sales price in red increases. Okay, and here's a little summary, couple pages of summary information. Okay, now I probably could have spent 3 hours going through that. Let me just double check. 1 second for me. I probably have another couple of moments. Who has some questions?
There's one of the charts, one of those I know that they said you could put in your specific, like area 13, area 14, and it will customize it.
That's right.
I've forgotten which one that is.
So there's actually a lot of slides that way. What I would recommend doing is download the PowerPoint version. I just showed you the PDF version, so it's static. But if you download the PowerPoint version, you actually need to have Microsoft Excel on your computer or on the computer in order for it to work. But yes, you could go in and edit, like say, hey, I'm looking for this price range in area 13. Show me the numbers.
And that's found on the internet? How do you find it?
Oh, so it's in the, hang on 1 second. Let me share my screen with you and I'll show you how to find the documents in the first place. Let me just look at the chat real fast. Lawanda, the packet that I just went through is in the announcements tab.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and okay. All right, let me share my screen and walk you through one last thing. Okay, so this is mykw.kw.com. Okay, you go to this little thing right here that says My Market Center Intranet. Okay, you go, hang on, go to Market Center, go to Documents, there's a lot of good content here, by the way, but go to Chartmaster. And then you can go back and look at these reports for years and years and years. And then you'll go to 2020 fourth quarter. And then I was showing you fourth quarter 20 detached. We also have reports for condos in town. And if you look here, see this is the PowerPoint, so you can download that version or the PDF, which is what I did. Okay. All right, any other questions?
That's great. Thanks.
Okay, what are your big takeaways?
Just being able to share.
Venus, go first. Sorry, Corey.
My biggest
That's okay.
focus on listings. Thank you. It's okay. And to focus on listings, yes.
Cool, I agree completely. Corey?
Yes, I agree with that. And then also, just to your point, being able to absorb, first of all of this information and to understand it so that we can speak it and convey the importance of it to our clients, whether it's buyers or sellers, so that they understand the impact of the market, because the market sets the prices. And, you know, they may be in an illusion that they can set the price here or there, but it's our job to show them where the market is and how to price accordingly.
Right, we are not responsible for making the market. We are responsible for interpreting the market, right? And you could say something like, I appreciate that, but I've got a couple of concerns with that. Would you mind if I shared them with you? Right, don't come out guns a-blazing, hey, that's a dumb idea, you need to price it here, right? Although every once in a while I have to take a deep breath and make sure I don't do that. However, you might say, hey, I've got a couple of concerns with that strategy. Would you mind if I shared them with you? Right? Let me pull out a couple of stats that show that strategy may cost us money. And actually, in your situation, may cost us a significant amount of money. Can I walk you through that? Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
You don't come at them like, you're an idiot, you know, that's a terrible idea, you're going to lose money, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like, hey, I've got some concerns about that strategy. You know, as a professional, I'm in this business all day. I'm working with talking to buyers and sellers all day. I'm going to help you be successful. Can I give you a couple pointers? Would that be okay? See what I'm saying? You're essentially the coach for the buyers and the coach for the sellers, so that they don't make dumb decisions. Make sense? Remember when we looked at that slide that had all the median prices year over, like, for the last 15 years? Guys, did you see which line was at the very top? This year, 2020. Remember how I said, if you own a home, you should be doing one of two things, selling it or refinancing. Okay, we've never had prices this good. If you don't like your house, now's the time to sell it. If you love your house, now's the time to buy it again.
I gotta use that.
You see what I'm saying? And by the way, I don't really care what you do, because I'm your guy. I'll get paid eventually. Okay. If you trust me and you're polite enough for me to continue this relationship, okay, then I'll get paid many times over at some point in the future. So if now's not a good time for you to sell or buy, fine. Right? I don't care. You see what I'm saying? All right. Charleston, do you have one more question?
Yeah. I wanted to know, where can I get a copy of that 43 pages as opposed to the 83 pages?
The 43-page version is in the Chartmasters, is in the announcements page on WhatsApp for PC. The 80-something page one is in the Market Center intranet that I just showed you how to get there.
Yeah. I'm actually looking at it right now because I have a listing presentation this afternoon. I'm definitely going to bring, I'm going to throw with the slides that I have. I'm going to just bring that one and then just use that.
Yeah, so for a seller, I would say the most important slide that you can show a seller is what's the difference between the average list price to sales price ratio if they price it correctly or they don't price it correctly. That's probably the most important. For a buyer, you want to show them that nearly half of sales are happening at or above list price, and you want to ask them, I got a question for you. It is an incredibly strong seller's market right now. However, there's a lot of opportunity. The rates have never been as low as they are today, and affordability has never been as good as it is today. So there is a very good likelihood that you will be in a multiple offer situation, and I will come to you and say, hey, it's time for highest and best, which is another way of saying, this contract will still protect you, but you're not going to feel like you're winning. So what's your comfort level in participating in a market like this, right? And they say, well, I'm buying a home for 80% of list price like my brother did 12 years ago. Well, dude, it ain't 2010 anymore. Okay. So there's no data to support that that's going to happen. Okay. So sometimes I feel like when I respond, I kind of have a tiny chip on my shoulder, and I don't mean for it to be that way. It's just, here's the data. Like, I'm not like coming out of the sky with all these ideas. Like, here's the data. If you want to participate and be successful, you got to work with the data. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We're the deliverers of the data. Okay. I hope this was really helpful, guys. It has, of course, been recorded. It will be on the YouTube page shortly. Outside of this video, we're completely updated. And I'm going to make a very direct request, actually two. First, my coach has access to our reporting, and we talk about it nonstop. Okay. So if you have not reported your numbers, go do that
right now
with the numbers when she pulls onto this call. She's in San Diego, so she's waking up at 7 in the morning, or probably a good bit more than that, so she can deliver some content to us today. So I'm going to request that you take time out of your day from 10 to 11 to participate. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. You guys have a wonderful afternoon. I'll see you in half an hour.
In this room, and